Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Glenorchy City Council on Monday, 28th of March 2022. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Palawa people as the traditional owners and ongoing custodians of this land on which we meet, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I'm Beck Thomas, Mayor of Glenorchy and Chairperson of tonight's council meeting. Joining me online this evening is Alderman Deputy Mayor Stephen King, Alderman Simon Fraser, Alderman Peter Ball, Alderman Sue Hickey, Alderman Melissa Carlton, Alderman Jan Dunsby, Alderman Gay Richardson and Alderman Angela Ryan. Joining me online tonight, joining me here in Council Chambers is General Manager Tony McMullen, and also joining online are a number of Council directors and staff relevant to items on tonight's agenda. We are taking all possible steps to minimise the risk of COVID, which is why Aldermen are joining the meeting online this evening, and we don't have members of the public present in Council Chambers, but we do welcome members of the public joining our live stream this evening, and we will look forward to welcoming members of the public back to Council Chambers for our April Planning Authority and Council meetings. I'll just make a statement about work, health and safety for Council meetings. Glenorchy City Council takes workplace health and safety seriously, and this includes physical and psychological safety. We have a duty to ensure that a safe workplace is provided for our employees, elected members, contractors, volunteers and members of the public who may be present in Council's workplaces. Council meetings form part of Council's workplace, whether meetings are held in person or online. It is expected that everyone who attends Council meetings will behave in a polite and respectful manner, refrain from using offensive or derogatory language or making personal statements, and not be aggressive, threatening, or speak in a hostile manner. Any disagreement should be expressed respectfully, and during debate and in decision making, we must remember we are elected to represent and serve the people of Glenorchy and to make our city the best it can be. We have 19 items on our agenda this evening, and agenda item 1 is apologies. We have apologies this evening from Alderman Kelly Sims. Agenda item 2 is a confirmation of minutes in the open council meeting. Do I have someone to move that the minutes of the council meeting held on 28th of February 2022 be confirmed? Moved Alderman Dunsby. Someone to second? Deputy Mayor, Alderman Dunsby.
No, I've got nothing to add, thank you.
Any comment or discussion on the minutes? Nothing to close. Alderman Dunsby, I assume?
No.
Put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Item 3 is announcements by the Chair, and I do not have any this evening. Item 4 is pecuniary interest notification. Do any aldermen have any pecuniary interest to declare on any items on tonight's agenda?
Mayor, I need to declare an interest in item 9 in closed council, General Manager's Mid-Term Performance Review 2021-22.
Item 19, General Manager.
I've got 9 there.
Item 19 is...
Item 19, correction.
Yep. I will note that down. We will note that for the minutes.
Item 18.
18. Item 18. Well, lucky we checked. Thank you. Item 18. General Manager, any other pecuniary interests? No, we'll move on then to item 5, which is response to previous public questions taken on notice. And we have some questions on notice received from Janice Bryan in relation to spending on consultant fees from January 2018 to the present time, and spending on media and marketing companies since January 2018 to the present time. And there has been an answer provided in the agenda. I have asked for a little bit further information to answer Ms. Bryan's question, so we will publish an updated response to that question in the meeting minutes and provide that directly to Ms. Bryan as well. Item 6 is public question time. As I mentioned, due to COVID restrictions, we haven't got members of the public joining us this evening, but we have received a number of questions from members of the public, some of which we were received in time to include in the agenda, One of those is from Mr. Eddie Steenbergen in relation to seeking a list of council plans, strategies and policies due for review in the 2020 calendar year, and asking for some information on the date and public consultation that is likely to be involved with the review. There has been an answer published in the agenda papers. Again, I've asked for a little bit more information to be incorporated into that answer and provided to Mr. Steenbergen, and that will also be provided in the minutes of the meeting. We also received a question or notice from Joshua Cortez in relation to the sport and recreation strategy that council recently endorsed, and the recommendations specific to the Aragon Archery Club at the Gerard Street Reserve. And he has asked a number of questions in relation to that strategy and the facilities there at the Gerard Street Reserve for the Aragon Archery Club, and the answers are included in the agenda papers. We've also received a range of questions from Mr. Russell Yaxley, Mr. Shane Alderton and Ms. Janice Bryan later over the weekend, and answers to these questions are being prepared and will be included in the minutes, which we expect to publish in draft form by next Monday. Answers to those questions will also be provided to those members of the public who have asked those questions. So Mr. Russell Yaxley asked about progress on the rejuvenation and regeneration of the Tolosa Dam, and progress in relation to the outcomes of Council's play space survey and our play space strategy. Mr. Shane Alderton has asked a number of questions in relation to the relocation of the BMX track, and Ms. Janice Bryan has asked some questions regarding the relocation of the BMX track as well. So answers to those questions, as I said, will be included in the minutes, and we thank members of the public for those questions. Moving on to item 7, which is petitions and deputations. Do we have any petitions or deputations received?
No, we don't, ma'am.
No. Move on to item 8, which is activities of myself, the Mayor. We have a recommendation that Council receive this report about the activities of Mayor Thomas during the period from Monday 21st of February to Saturday 19th of March 2022. Do I have someone to move that recommendation? Deputy Mayor, and seconded Alderman Richardson. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of brief questions, if you wouldn't mind enlightening us on your discussions with Larry Kesselman and Boris.
Sure, yes. So Mr. Kesselman came to meet with the General Manager and myself he was in town visiting to watch one of the Jack Jumper games. I believe it was the night of our last council meeting, in fact, that he was at the basketball. He was in town, and I attended the last part of that game and had a brief chat to him there, and he indicated he'd like to catch up to talk to the General Manager and I about where sort of things are heading, I guess, where his thoughts are with the proposed development of Wilkinson's Point. So he still certainly has a desire to contribute in terms of the development of that area, and he was just, I guess, throwing around some ideas and thoughts about what that might look like. Obviously, that is subject to negotiations with the state government, who are now the owners of that land.
And your discussions with Inspector Ward regarding antisocial behaviour.
Yeah, thank you. Inspector Ward has been extremely responsive to our calls as a council in terms of improving or increasing the police patrols around our CBD area in response to council's work in relation to trying to minimise or reduce antisocial behaviour in our CBD. So it's been really important that we have an ongoing dialogue with Inspector Ward and Senior Sergeant Carl Corelli from Glenorchy Police. And so we've been meeting with them quite regularly just to hear about the extra activities that Glenorchy Police have been engaging in around the CBD area, and to, I guess, he's seeking feedback from council as to whether we think that's helpful and how else we can work together to try and combat some of the antisocial behaviour.
That's great. And I noticed you attended a cooking class. You got any recipes you can pass on?
No, but it tasted good, what I cooked.
I believe you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if you could tell us about your meeting with Vanessa Ward from HOFM, and then further down later in the month you also attended a marketing and communication seminar.
Yeah, thank you. So I met with Vanessa Ward to talk about opportunities for communication and promotion, marketing, communication, promotion through HOFM, the radio station, really just to hear about the types of opportunities that are available through the radio station and what sort of the costs might be if council were to use that as a tool to communicate with our community about some of the activities and projects that we have happening. And further to that meeting, she invited me to attend that seminar, which provided an overview of how people are receiving and consuming, if you like, different forms of media. Of course, the seminar showed that radio was the most popular, surprisingly, form of media that people are still consuming. And they were promoting, HFM was promoting their Your Brand program. So that was something, I guess, to bring back and discuss. And our executive officer also attended one of those seminars just to get some information. We're always looking for ways to broaden our communication to the community and improve our communication to the community. So it's really a fact-finding mission, if you like.
Thank you.
Any further discussion of the item? I'll go back to the mover, Deputy Mayor King.
No, Mayor, thank you. Been very informative.
No worries. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 9, Glenorchy CBD safety. We have a recommendation that council endorse the continuation of a security presence in the Glenorchy CBD across the week at varying times and days until 31st of December 2022, with appropriate provision for these services to be made in the budget estimates for the current financial year and the 2022-23 year, noting the likely costs are up to $24,200 excluding GST for the remainder of the current financial year and up to $52,800 excluding GST within the 22-23 financial year, and request an update report to the November 22 Ordinary Council meeting on the outcomes of the Community Action Plan, including the use of security services and Salvation Army street teams. Do I have someone to move this recommendation, please?
Mayor, before this is tabled, I'd like to propose an alternative motion, please.
Sure.
Exactly the same, identical, but adding in a third section or a third recommendation to continue to lobby Tas Police and the state government for additional police patrols around the Glenorchy CBD. I've sent the words through to the executive officer already.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Fraser. So to continue to lobby the government for continued police patrols around the Glenorchy CBD.
Or increased.
Oh, sorry,
increased frequency of.
increased rather than continued. Yep, good. Do I have someone to second that alternative motion? Alderman Dunsby. Thank you. Alderman Fraser.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, look, I'll be brief. The report here outlines the steps that council's taken over the past few months to address the antisocial behaviour on the front of the council lawns and in the general Glenorchy CBD area. I think we probably all agree that this is not really something that we describe as core council business, but nevertheless, it falls to the council and therefore ratepayers to try and address this behaviour in some way, in any way they can, and the security officers that have been employed by council, according to this report, have been quite effective up to this point in addressing that behaviour, which is great. But even though we're, I guess, endorsing a recommendation that this arrangement may continue into the future, I think there'll probably be an endpoint at some point where other measures need to be taken. It's not financially feasible for the council to be continually employing security officers like this, but while it's working and while we don't have additional support from the police on this issue just now because of resourcing, this is really the only option available to us. So, I'm happy to open it up to the rest of the Aldermen for comment.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Further discussion on the item. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to endorse everything that Alderman Fraser has said. and add that it's just extremely sad that we have to take these measures, and it's really sad actually. But I would like to congratulate the security people and the work that they do. I've met with them on a number of occasions, just wandering through there, and they really take their work seriously. And even though it's a job, they give it their best there, and it's not a simple job, not an easy job when people are being abusive, etc., towards them when they're just doing their job. So again, I endorse everything Alderman Fraser said and add that.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Alderman Hickey. Oh, you're just on mute.
My apologies. I think one of the big things with this report is that whilst it does look like an expensive exercise, when we review it against the damage, the physical atmosphere of the place, the situation where rubbish bins are being overturned, people are urinating in public, all sorts of revolting behaviour on the lawns and around that area. It wasn't a safe or good look for the city. And I think the expenses have certainly cleaned up the mood around the lawns. And I think it's been a good proactive move by the council. I look forward to the situation where we're in partnership with the other not-for-profit organisations till the public are re-educated. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. I hope that people do take the time to read the report and appreciate it like I am, that we see that there are multifaceted attacks on this particular problem, that we're seeing various different organisations who will be increasing their presence within Glenorchy as well. Pardon me, I see one of the projects is only 1 day a week, but there are intentions to increase that. And we're seeing the troublesmiths coming on board as well. So I think the activation of the space is also a key to it. But hopefully people can see and acknowledge and appreciate it's not just council taking action here, that we do have a partnership on this, and partnering with these particular organisations hopefully will be of great benefit as well. So I'd like to thank the author of the report in particular for providing the holistic information for us, not just from the council perspective, but seeing how it is being attacked at multiple fronts. I also believe that we will see, with those organisations coming on board, we will be in a better position to see how our actions and their actions will be reflected towards the end of this calendar year. And the report does say we will hear back in November, and I think that is good timing for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? No. I'll try speak briefly to this item. This is something that quite clearly has been a priority for all of us around the council table, and I appreciate the will of council officers to take up that as a priority and a concern and act by implementing the trial of security guards. It is something that community members are talking to me about out and about around the CBD area, and are thanking us for having that security presence, telling us that they feel safer in the municipality and that they really appreciate the investment the council is making to ensure that people feel safe and welcomed in our municipality, around our CBD in particular. I know talking to the security guards, they've had people come and tell them how grateful they are as well, and that there are older couples coming back to have picnics on the lawn again. There are families who feel like they can enjoy the space. It is a beautiful forecourt area, and our Parks and Gardens crew work really hard to maintain the rose garden and to keep the area looking pretty spick and span. So it's really great that it can be enjoyed and appreciated by people once again. Some of the behaviour that we're seeing is the result of what are quite wicked problems and deep-rooted problems within our community, and there is no quick fix to addressing them. There are a number of community organisations and support services who are working with people of all ages who act out in certain ways that do frighten people and are unacceptable in our city. We can't fix those wicked problems as a council, but we do need to make sure that our people who are around our council Chambers area feel safe and well connected and welcome. So I'm supportive of the continuation of the trial. I note it is money that we hadn't budgeted for, and it will come from our existing cash reserves, but I appreciate the ongoing efforts of other organisations, businesses and community organisations around this CBD area who have come to the table. As you can see in the action plan, there's a number of organisations who have been involved in the CBD roundtable discussions, including the local hairdresser, representatives from Vicinity, representing Northgate, and from Knight Frank representing Big W and the Big W and Glenorchy Central Complex. We've had representatives from Metro engaged, from Breast Green Tasmania, Tasmania Police, Salvation Army, Troublesmiths coming on board. So we've got a whole range of people working towards these shared goals. And this is just one part of the puzzle, and unfortunately the most expensive part. But yeah, very supportive, as I say, of continuing on that commitment to make sure people feel safe. I'm supportive of Alderman Fraser's addition in the motion to continue to lobby the government for increased police patrols around the Glenorchy CBD. It is something that we're having ongoing conversations with Glenorchy Police on. And I have also raised at a recent meeting with the Premier, again, as a priority. So we will, but again, continuing to lobby perhaps in written form is important as well. So we will continue to do that too. Said I'd be brief, and I haven't been, so I'll go back to the mover now, Alderman Fraser.
No, I think you've covered everything well. Thanks, Mayor.
No worries, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 10, land disposal update. Priority disposals to support housing supply. And we have a recommendation that Council authorise a community engagement process to be undertaken to identify any community concerns about the potential disposal of the following properties: 23A Norman Circle, Glenorchy, and 261 Main Road, Austin's Ferry. And if there are no unresolved community concerns, authorise the General Manager to commence the statutory process for the disposal of the properties under Section 178 of the Local Government Act. And if there are unresolved community concerns, require a report to a future council meeting to enable council to consider those concerns and decide whether or not to commence a process under Section 178 of the Local Government Act 1993. I have someone to move these recommendations. Deputy Mayor, seconded Alderman Richardson. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. This is quite straightforward. I think it protects the community and it gives us an opportunity to look at moving this land on to a more appropriate situation. And so I'm supportive of this as it stands.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion of the item? No further discussion. I have a question, if I may. When the report talks about, in terms of the community engagement process that will be undertaken, at a minimum it will consist of developing a survey using our Let's Talk Glenorchy community engagement platform for consultation with residents, and also conducting a door knock of residents directly adjacent to the properties to encourage them to participate in the survey, and sending a letter to residents whose properties are located within a 100-metre radius or potentially more, advising of the survey. I just wondered, there are quite there's quite a bit of commercial activity that occurs around that area, and we noted a number of representations received last week at a Glenorchy Planning Authority meeting from businesses in that area about the rezoning of another parcel of land. So I guess want some assurance that it won't, the consultation in the door knocking or the actual that will be expanded to include the businesses in that area, given we know some of the concerns they have about that. General Manager?
Director, Infrastructure and Works.
Director of Infrastructure and Works, Emilio Reali.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we can ensure that we make sure notifications go to the commercial and industrial businesses as well as the residents.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions or discussion of the item? I will say that I'm very pleased to see this report come to Council. It was an agenda item we had At our 21st of December 2021 meeting, following an annual general meeting resolution to present a report to Council on the current housing initiatives, the work that Council is doing to address the housing shortage in our municipality and in fact Greater Hobart, and Council officers were asked to bring back advice by June this year regarding suitable sites and seeking approval to commence public consultation, explore ways to expedite the rezoning process. So we're ahead of time. It's March, so thank you to Council officers for acting quickly on that request. I'm pleased to commence the consultation with the community. We know and to go through this process is important, even though we know there's this crisis. There is an immediate need. It's really for housing. It's really important that we do consult adequately with our community on any proposed disposal of land. So it's a balancing act, and yes, we want to support the provision of more housing, but we also have to make sure that we get a good gauge of how the community feels about disposing of what is effectively their land. So happy to commence the process and support the recommendations before us. There's nothing further. I'll go back to the mover, Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this gives an opportunity for future land development to be opened up for development for properties, and it's needed. Again, it's not going to happen without the community being consulted and being fully aware of what's likely to happen. If there is a major concern, this motion covers that and allows for that protection of the community. So I'm more than happy with the motion as it stands.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 11, BMX track relocation. We have a recommendation that Council note the update on the potential relocation of the Southern City BMX track to Pembroke Park in the Sorell Council, LGA, and the decision of Sorell Council to give its in-principle support to the project, subject to further investigations of the total cost. Do I have someone to move this recommendation, please? Alderman Richardson, someone to second. Alderman Fraser. Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got to admit that I'm a little disappointed that we couldn't find a suitable location for the BMX track in Glenorchy, but we couldn't find the ideal location, and we have to be practical about this. It's a regional club, not Glenorchy specific. There is an opportunity here to build good quality track close to amenities and the CBD. So Sorell have expressed an interest in having the track located at Pembroke, and it dovetails into their sport and rec strategy or planning. So the recommendation is to note the update of the potential relocation and give it in principle support subject to further investigation. So I'm happy to support that.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Dunsty.
Thank you. I think when Council initiated the discussions on the potential move to Tolosa Park, no one could have predicted that the geographical study would have given an outcome indicating that the land at Tolosa Park would not have been suitable. I'm satisfied that the Council officers investigated every avenue of potential sites throughout our city to relocate the Southern BMX Club. And the new course needs to be to national standards, so the current facility is not to that standard. It also needs to be supported by appropriate facilities, and building these from scratch would be very expensive at a remote site. I'm also satisfied that Council officers investigated every avenue of sites through our city. I also appreciate that the Southern City BMX members are predominantly very happy with this outcome that we've come to. A few people may be inconvenienced, but their membership is wider than just Glenorchy and travelling a little further, but they are gaining a regional sports facility. I believe that the benefits possibly outweigh any move to stay put, and that's my understanding of the club's position. They gain potentially future members. They have a bigger community and a younger community in down there to potentially draw members from, and their support and the support for the sport as a whole, I think, would be of a benefit too. with their hosting of events, if they can host a national event, it becomes a major fundraising opportunity for them as well, where they provide catering and other things and are paid to have the events. So it does actually increase their ability to fundraise for the club, to input, to support juniors and others within their group. Transferring the balance of the economic stimulus grant is a little bit of a bugbear for me, but we have inconvenienced this particular group, and so maybe that can be viewed a little bit as compensatory for them having that move as well. But for me, I have to view it from a governance perspective and take the emotive out of it. This will be a short-term financial pain that we may have if we come to this decision, but long-term it will create savings around maintenance and depreciation, and plus we unlock the financial potential of the current land, and there's already strong interest in its future. I believe the financial benefits outweigh the short-term financial loss. It's also interesting to note that the 433,597 may not be the final amount transferred to council, because our officers are continuing to negotiate the final outcome, and I do appreciate that. So we're unable to reallocate the funds to another project, so it would be returned to the government if it wasn't expended on this particular project. So I believe the outcome is actually beneficial to both Southern City BMX and the sport as a whole, and I just think it brings a future positive financial outcome for us as well, long term, not short term, but certainly long term. So I'll be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? Alderman Hickey.
I'd just like to thank Alderman Dunsby, because I think she succinctly summed up what we've had explained to us by the officers. And sometimes these decisions might look quite bizarre to people who have not got all the background information, but I can assure you we wouldn't be supporting anything to this sort of value unless it was going to be in the public's best interest. So we've all participated in the discussion, read it, understood it, reluctantly accepted it, but this is the way things go, and sometimes you just can't be all things to all people. So I think it's a great outcome for the BMX club themselves, and an acceptable outcome for the council.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion? No, I agree with Alderman Hickey that Alderman Dunsby has summed it up very well there and made a lot of comments that that echo my feelings about this item. We did consider this item at our last council meeting in February with a lot of the information we're presented with tonight in closed council, and I'd just like to make it clear to members of the public that unfortunately we're unable to release the details as we are this month at last month's council meeting. And we did consider the item in closed council because publicly releasing details of these negotiations could have jeopardised the negotiations with both Sorrel Council and the Tasmanian Government and damaged council's relationships with these parties. So most definitely we were not withholding information from our community, and we have been conscious of communicating as much as we can every step of the way through this process so far, and we will certainly continue to do that. Alderman Dunsby has talked about the economic benefits to Glenorchy City Council, but more importantly to our ratepayer over time of development of the Berriedale Peninsula. Mona has invested significantly on this site since establishing there in 2011 and has a capital investment pipeline in place that is contingent on utilisation of the parcels of land that include the BMX track. Significant expenditure by Mona on the care and maintenance of its assets on the site contribute ongoing economic growth through procurement of local goods and services. The use of these sites will result in Mona increasing its asset base, and this will flow on to increases in ongoing expenditure, procuring goods and services on current levels, therefore increasing our city's gross regional product. In addition, the change of use associated with the parcels of land may result in increased rate revenue for council. And of course, the commercial rent that we can obtain over a long period of time and annually is far greater than the rent we obtain through a not-for-profit lease to a sporting club. Overall, this is a decision that is in the best interest of our ratepayer overall. We've got to remember we are making decisions for a city of 47,000 people, and this certainly is in the best interest of our broader community. I also note the club has issued an email to all its members today showing its support for this proposed move to Sorell. They are quite excited about the potential membership benefits that they can have down there, the growth potential, and the idea of having a national standard competition track, and the benefits that that will bring more broadly to the club, not only to the club, but more broadly to the sport in Tasmania as well. It is indeed an Olympic sport. So I'm very supportive of the recommendation before us, and I'm grateful for the efforts of council officers in working and negotiating with Sorell Council to get to this stage so far. I will ask a few questions without notice when we get to that stage of the agenda, just to get a few things on the public record, noting that there has been a minority, a few community members raising concern about this particular decision. And all, obviously we want to make sure all questions are answered and information is provided on the public record. But if there's no further discussion of the item, I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I think it's been pretty well covered. Go to the vote.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 12, updated council policies. We have a recommendation that council adopt the updated notification to purchasers contaminated land in Lutana policy, adopt the updated sponsorship policy, rescind the human resources policy, and rescind the planning appeals and enforcement policy. Do I have someone to move this recommendation, please? Alderman Hickey, someone to second? Alderman Carlton, Alderman Hickey.
Yes, I understand all the reasoning that behind these policies, but I am a bit disappointed that we say we review our policies every 4 years, and particularly the one for Lutana, which was 2016. It's very disappointing that it's taken this long, particularly with such a potential health issue. I'm just going to put that on the record that I think we really need to urgently address all of our policies actually as soon as possible, so that we can bring them into line with our commitment to whatever time frame we put on each policy for review.
Thank you.
Because that one's now out to 6 years, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion? No. I too support the recommendation. The reasons have been clearly outlined as to why we would adopt these updated policies and rescind the 2 policies I mentioned. So I'm happy to support those recommendations. Anything to close debate? Alderman Hickey.
No, thank you.
Put the recommendations to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That's carried unanimously. Item 13, procurement and contracts monthly report. I have a recommendation that council receive and note the procurement and contracts monthly report for the period from 16th of February to 14th of March 2022. I have someone to move this recommendation. Alderman Fraser, someone to second. Alderman Dunsby. Alderman Fraser. Oh, you're on mute.
Just noting that there was just a small figure of 2,900 relating to some legal services, but no, that's really all I have to say about it.
Right. Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion? Nothing to close debate then, Alderman Fraser, I assume?
No.
I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That's carried unanimously. With a delay there, a couple of people on the technology. Item 14, financial performance report to 28th of February 2022. We have a recommendation that council receive and note the financial performance report for year to date ending 28th of February 2022. Have someone to move this recommendation, please. Alderman Richardson, seconded Alderman Fraser. Alderman Richardson.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. The financial performance reports have been pretty consistent as the trend lines in the graphs indicate. We're still looking at end of year, a financial year deficit of 775,000. I can't see anything in the report that stands out as out of the ordinary, so I'm happy to receive and note the report. I don't have any questions, so thank you, Mayor.
Excellent. Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion? If there's nothing to close debate, Alderman Richardson,
No, nothing.
I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. Alderman Ryan? Alderman Ryan? No? Alderman Ryan, just confirming you are against? Oh, for. For? That's carried unanimously. Okay. Item 15. We're cooking with gas tonight, aren't we? Notices of motion, questions on notice without notice. We have some answers to previous questions taken on notice from Alderman Sims in relation to the Glenorchy Historical Society and our Suicide Prevention Community Action Plan, and the answers to those questions are included in the agenda papers. We also have a question on notice from Alderman Fraser in relation to wild rabbits appearing to be an increasing problem in Glenorchy at the moment. And there is an answer there referring to council being aware of the issue and the invasive species branch of the Department of Natural Resources and Environment, who are responsible for the control of rabbits in the state, periodically scheduling control programs. There's further detail provided in the agenda papers. Do you have any further questions without notice? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if I could add a question to the information put forward by Alderman Fraser. I received an inquiry from a member of the public who witnessed people dealing with the rabbit and eradicating them by the use of ferrets. And they were told that the people were from council, and I've had reassurance it's not from council. And I'm just wondering, perhaps my question is, how does the department deal with people undertaking that means of rabbit eradication? The people who witnessed it were quite distressed and felt it was a little bit inhumane, the way that it was being carried out. And I'm just wondering whether is that a comment worth that we could perhaps feed through to the Department of Natural Resources and Environment Tasmania on the strength of that community concern that was raised with me.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby.
Mayor, we're happy to take that on notice.
Happy to take that on notice. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any other questions without notice? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. My question relates to the budget consultation process that's happening at the moment. So we do have a Let's Talk Glenorchy opportunity for people to participate in a budget consultation process. That does close on the 31st of March. So I just wanted to get an update through you, Mayor, on how successful that consultation has been, so how many responses that we've received, and what measures we're taking to let people know how they can participate in that important consultation process.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Carlton. I'm happy to have a go at answering that, and then and see if our Executive Officer, Bryn Hannon, might want to add anything. So you're right, our budget consultation survey has been open for some time now, since around, at least November, December, maybe even earlier. I'll get Bryn to clarify that. So sometime we have had around, as at last Monday, I haven't had an update today, but as at last Monday, we had around 78 responses to that budget survey. And fairly consistent information coming in from the community about where they see our priorities as a council. It was promoted through a number of ways. So it was obviously on our Let's Talk Glenorchy platform. So anyone who signed up to Let's Talk Glenorchy would have received an email alerting them to the opportunity. There was information published as a news item on our website. It's been promoted on our council Facebook page, and certainly I've promoted it on my Facebook page, as I think some other aldermen have as well. We had an article in the Gazette, and I referred to it. I spent most of one of the Gazette columns, monthly columns in the Gazette, talking about it as well, and I think that just about sums it up. Have I missed anything, Executive Officer?
Thank you, Mayor. No, you have pretty well captured everything there. The only thing I would add to that is that as of today, we have had 85 responses, so an additional 7 responses this week. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to jump on to letstalk.gcc.tas.gov.au and leave your feedback.
Thank you. Excellent. Does that answer your question, Alderman Carlton?
It does, thank you, and endorse the comments from our executive officer for people to jump online and to complete that survey, which I believe is just one part of our overall process for budget consultation this year.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Ditto. Any further questions without notice? As I mentioned, I have 3 questions without notice in relation to the BMX relocation project. So my first 2 are perhaps for the Director of Infrastructure and Works. What other sites were investigated in the municipality to potentially relocate the BMX track to? Is the Southern City BMX Club supportive of the proposed move to Sorell, and what indication do we have of this? And then perhaps one for our manager, our Director of Strategy and Planning. What is the economic benefit of relocating the track to the ratepayers of Glenorchy over time, i.e. how will the $460,000 loan repayments be made up and over what time, and what will be the longer term benefit that justifies this as the cost of doing business? So I'm not sure if you want to answer those now or take them on notice. Director Riali?
Mayor, I can answer or attempt to answer the first 2. Once we learned that the site at Thalassa Park was not really suitable, and I guess we undertook the geotechnical investigation, investigated what services were in the area, the high voltage overhead power lines and the Taswater trunk main. The way it had to be orientated meant that we'd lose some of the other facilities. So we started looking at other sites within the Glenorchy municipal area. One of the first ones we looked at was the Collinsvale Recreation Ground. However, we found that there was a reasonable amount of slope on that site, which I guess increased the cost, has significant overland water flow, and there was also the club themselves. They weren't too keen to travel to Collinsvale based on the weather conditions that they might have to endure during the winter, and also there was a lack of services to that site, so it would have cost over $2.5 million. After Ambulance Tas let us know that they weren't interested in the Goodwood Park site, we also investigated that. However, the size of that site didn't suit a national standard track. So we moved on from that site. We went back to Thalassa Park actually and looked at some other locations within the park. One that used to be called the Woodyard, so up behind the northern corner of the park. However, once again, we found the grade was a bit steep and overhead power lines were a bit lower there, so that created another issue for us. We looked at the Glenorchy landfill site, some of the land that's already been capped off, so off the Chapel Street side. We had a reasonably flat site, but access road, car parking, lack of facilities became an issue there again, so that put the cost up again to over $2.5 million. We looked at Abbotsfield Park near the skate park that's in that area. However, land area wasn't big enough in that site. We looked at the Palmina Hestercombe Reserve area. Whilst that has got some services nearby, the grade of that site and the services once again hindered us from actually being able to use it. We looked at the Jim Bacon Reserve, an area of land there, but the grade of that site was also something that discounted that. We looked at some way leave easement sites in the Claremont area, and we looked at numerous other parcels of land owned by council by doing a desktop review on our GIS system to see if we could find anything that we could overlay the national standard track over that would fit. However, we had no luck. So we felt we exhausted all available avenues before we actually started looking outside of the municipal area.
Okay, thank you.
The answer to the second question, Mayor, the BMX Club, we have met with the committee on numerous occasions. We had let them know what we'd investigated, the outcomes, and actually discussed the option of looking outside of the municipal area. We suggested a couple other areas, but we came to Sorel, Pembroke Park, as we were aware that they were developing a master plan for that site and that there was already a smaller bike endurance track that had to be rebuilt. The committee members were actually very supportive of us investigating that on their behalf. So we approached the council and had a discussion with them about it. They were certainly interested, and we let the club know this, and basically we've kept them informed along the way. Just recently, they also released a email informing their club members, as you've mentioned, Mayor, letting them know that they are reasonably happy that things have progressed to the point where they are now, and the fact that we've actually continued to try and find another location for them. They have mentioned that they realise that Sorel is a growing area, lots of new housing subdivisions coming up, lots of young families, lots of facilities. Pembroke Park actually works well for them. And with the highway upgrade or duplication, they believe access will be, travel times will be less than what they are now, and access will be pretty good. And their catchment is the southern region of Tasmania. So they currently have members in Sorel, Lauderdale, Dodgers Ferry. So they are quite supportive. In fact, I had a conversation with the club secretary today just to provide another update, and she once again expressed how positive they were for this actually progressing.
Excellent. Thank you, Director, for that information. And the third question, perhaps Dr. Fox.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question, Mayor. In terms of the economic development associated with the relocation of the BMX track, it is a key aspect of unlocking the development potential of the Berriedale Peninsula. We expect it to create economic development and jobs for the community, and as you mentioned earlier, increase our gross regional product, as well as increasing revenue for council in future years. I'll take you back a little bit. So in February 2020, we did release the Glenorchy Economic Development Strategy, which set out our approach for growing jobs and Glenorchy's economy. It included 50 actions, and one of those actions was actually facilitating the development of the Berriedale Peninsula, including through finalising the Berriedale Master Plan. Now, when we were in the early days of the pandemic in 2020, we stood up our economic recovery program, and we pulled out 10 actions from that economic development strategy to stimulate our economy in the sectors hardest hit by COVID. One of those actions was around developing the Berriedale Peninsula and specifically relocating the BMX track. So that's how this has come about. We went forward and developed the Berriedale Peninsula Master Plan, as you'll remember, in 2020, and we set the vision for the peninsula, which was about balancing the development of the Berriedale Peninsula, that economic development of the site and the cultural opportunities, and particularly because Mona's on the site, with ensuring that locals and visitors can enjoy the Berriedale Peninsula, whether they're looking to exercise or for entertainment. We identified in that master plan the land at the peninsula, and particularly this BMX track land, as being critical for unlocking development of the peninsula. And we, through subsequent consultations and meetings, we agreed to relocate the BMX facility at Berriedale. Since then, we've been working, as Emilio said, with the club and trying to find the best location for that track. But the relocation of the BMX track is critical to unlocking that development potential of the peninsula. We will see significant economic and financial benefits coming out of that redevelopment over the next 100 years. We know that Mona is a municipal draw card, I guess, for visitors to our municipality. It creates jobs and economic activity. And as you mentioned earlier, this is both through construction and direct jobs on the site, but also as they procure goods and services through our local businesses. So it has flow-on effects through Glenorchy's economy. It's a significant tourist attraction. It's a national and international tourist attraction, and it brings people to our municipality. They're planning, Mona is planning to do several new developments at the site. They've got underground tunnels in the works, expanded lawns, food and beverage outlets, children's playground. They're looking for additional office space to house employees who are currently across Greater Hobart at the Berrydale site, additional car parking for all of these activities, redevelopment of caravan park site and a hotel, as we have heard, being developed in future. So relocation of the BMX track and importantly redevelopment of that site is critical to Mona's development aspirations, but also other development aspirations for the peninsula. This will create, as I said, jobs and economic benefits, but also importantly for council, increase rate revenue over time. So as those changes in use happen over time, as the development happens over time, we will see increased rate revenue, and we also will see revenue from the lease or disposal of that land itself.
Okay, thank you for that comprehensive answer, Director Fox. Any other questions without notice? No? We will move on then to item 15.1, which is a notice of motion from Alderman Ryan. Oh, no. Notice of motion from Alderman Ryan, Refugee Welcome Zone Declaration. So we have a motion that Council sign the Refugee Council of Australia Declaration and declare Glenorchy City Council a refugee welcome zone. Such declaration being a commitment in spirit to welcoming refugees into our community, upholding the human rights of refugees, demonstrating compassion for refugees and enhancing cultural and religious diversity in our community, and holding to the spirit of declaring Glenorchy a refugee welcome zone, declare its support for the endorsement on 31st of January 2022 by Hobart City Council to voice support and advocate on behalf of the refugees stranded at the Park Hotel in Melbourne. I have someone to move this recommendation. Alderman Ryan, your second. Alderman Dunsby. Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just briefly summarise the rationale. Yes, this is a proposal that Glenorchy Council sign on to the Refugee Welcome Zone, which is an initiative of the Refugee Council of Australia that was started in 2002. So far, there are 166 local government areas across Australia that have signed on to this initiative. There are 11 other councils across Tasmania. It was something that I understand from the officers in our community development section that this was something that was in train but got interrupted by the whole COVID process. But it's in line with actions that Glenorchy Council has already taken. So we are, for example, a welcoming city. We've also signed on to the Racism It Stops With Me kind of initiative. So this is well within our philosophy as a council. So the community development officers have suggested that Refugee Week, which I think is in June, would be a good opportunity to make this part of our celebrations and to declare ourselves a refugee welcome zone. The process is simple. We sign a declaration. We can have someone from the Refugee Council of Australia present as part of the ceremony. There are no costs involved to the council. There are no statutory obligations. It's a voluntary thing. Everything that we may do as part of this philosophy is voluntary. So there are no costs or legislative obligations. But in in the spirit of this declaration, takes me to part 2 of the motion, which is to support the resolution that was made by Hobart City Council in January, which was to advocate on behalf of the refugees that were stranded at the Park Hotel in Melbourne. Some of these guys have been released, and there's been a number of developments since that time. For example, our Premier has said that he was willing to have a conversation with the Tassie Nanas about what we could do. There's been some developments which I'm not privy to everything, but I understand some of the guys are still stuck there, and I just think we need to stand together in support of our Hobart colleagues and advocate for these refugees until they're all settled. So I think that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm happy to take any questions or just open it up for a discussion.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. Any questions or discussion of the item? Alderman Fraser.
Actually, Mayor, I was going to suggest that that we debate this motion in separate items, separating items 1 and 2. I think item 1 is probably, I don't think there's likely to be any opposition to that. Item 2 is probably slightly more contentious for me, anyway. I actually haven't read the exact wording of the motion that was moved by Hobart City Council, which I probably would want to read, I think, before I actually endorsed it. But certainly the first one, Glenorchy has been welcoming to refugees for many years, and look, I think that Alderman Ryan is coming from a place of kindness here, as are is it the knitting nanas? I've forgotten what they're called, but
Tassie Nanas.
the Tassie Nanas, yes, I've seen them in the mall several times knitting, and yeah, look, they do a great job drawing attention to this issue. In general, I would say, as you probably all know what I'm going to say, but I don't necessarily view this as an issue that is something that local government should be too concerned with, particularly the second one, I should say. I should clarify my statement there, that I don't think that necessarily local government should be getting involved in lobbying the federal government to relocate refugees to Hobart. As we know, we do have an accommodation crisis going on here at the moment, which means that I think it's very problematic suggesting that we should be relocating people here when we're having trouble homing the people that are living here already. But yeah, very happy to support the first motion. I think that's it's something that our constituents would expect of us, to be welcoming to refugees. The second one is slightly more contentious for me, I must say.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. So I might just take some advice on whether you are procedural advice there, because from what I hear, you're not moving an amendment to remove part 2.
Yeah, I don't know what's the best way of handling. Can I foreshadow a motion? Is that the way to do it?
Or we may be able to consider it in 2 parts. Can we do that, General
That's what I was going to suggest, Mayor, that the mover and the seconder may want to consider consenting to an amendment to the motion that says that items 1 and 2 of the motion be considered separately.
How would you feel about that, Alderman Ryan and Alderman Dunsby?
I'm happy for that.
I'm happy for that. I'd just like to say that I can address some of Alderman Fraser's concerns if it's appropriate.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it wasn't phrased as a question, so if we consider them as two separate parts, you will have the opportunity to speak to that motion separately. So perhaps that's the best way to do it.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so if we consider that currently we have moved and seconded the first part, then, and I will seek further discussion on recommendation 1. Any further discussion on recommendation 1? No? I too echo Alderman Fraser's comments in this is this is something that we should support as a council, in my view. We are one of, if not the most multicultural communities in Tasmania, and we have a strong history of supporting refugees to come here and settle here and be welcome here in our community of Glenorchy. We have a lot of support services based in our municipality. So we are already effectively a welcome zone. I would like to think that we are already a welcome zone. So this is really just putting some formality around that. So I'm most definitely happy to support recommendation 1. Any further discussion of that? No? And I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Ryan.
No, I'm happy to go to the vote. We're going to the vote on the first
Yes,
part?
that's right. So
Yep.
put
Yep.
part 1 of the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is carried unanimously. And Alderman Ryan, would you like to move part 2, I assume?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Yes. Hang on, before you speak to it, I'll get someone to second it. Someone to second part 2. Deputy Mayor, Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I will just address some of the concerns that Alderman Fraser raised. One, for example, is with regard to housing. And thanks for the question, because it is an important part of this conversation. But what I would say is that we're talking about asylum seekers in this instance, and so they're really not in competition with people in Tasmania who are looking for homes or are homeless, because the same sorts of accommodation are not appropriate for these different kind of cohorts. So it wouldn't be about diverting resources from one cohort to another cohort. I've had discussions with the Migrant Resource Centre, and they have started asking for funding from the state government for a new initiative with regard to a homestay kind of situation. Their initiative, though, would be with regard to humanitarian visa applicants, and really confined to small groups of people where you have just an individual or a very small group, such as an adult and a child. That would be appropriate to have a homestay kind of situation. But this kind of initiative wouldn't be appropriate to general Tasmanians who are looking for a home. So there is an idea that this would be appropriate for asylum seekers who are, again, a different category to humanitarian visa entrants, but still much more similar. And so this is it's not in competition with what we're trying to do with regard to housing. So our housing situation will not be affected. We're also talking about a short-term situation, because now it seems they're going to be resettled somewhere else. But in the meantime, they need to be settled. It's not fair that they stay in some kind of detention. So there also is an end date. So it's not as if we need to be finding accommodation for them for the long term, which we do need to do for our existing Tasmanians. Also, with regard to the point that this is perhaps not a local government matter, I just want to say that 166 local government areas across Australia have signed on to the Refugee Welcome Zone initiative. And the Refugee Council of Australia says that local government has historically played an important role in assisting refugee settlement. So I guess I'm going to say if we sign on to this initiative and we declare ourselves a refugee welcome zone, but then when there's something that maybe we can do, we say, oh no, sorry, not my job. So I'm saying, you know, we should show our support in spirit, the spirit of the declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. Any further discussion of this part of the motion? Alderman Hickey.
Yes, I understand Alderman Fraser's concerns. My initial reaction was also about, you know, housing our own people first, and I think Angela Ryan has explained that fairly well. I also have to admit that, you know, when a famous tennis player came to Australia and tried to breach our COVID rules, that was such a shock to find out that these people were still trapped in this hotel. I think, you know, collectively Australians had forgotten, and all of a sudden it was raised back into our collective consciousness again. And you know, I was really appalled by the treatment that we have given these people. Look, if you're going to declare them not as a refugee or asylum seeker or whatever it is as a government, you should do it swiftly and not let them linger in this terrible way, locked in a hotel room during what was nearly 2 years of COVID. So I support Alderman Ryan's views on the fact that local government has historically got involved in lots of issues, and I know many councils lobbied for the same-sex debate and lots of debates that have shifted the whole thinking around Aboriginality and acceptance, and some councils are flying flags and made very public stances. I think that's the word. Yeah. So, you know, sometimes we shouldn't just be confined to roads, rates and rubbish. I think if we can advocate for a more humane society generally, then we have a right to do that.
Thank you, Alderman Hickey. Any further discussion?
Am I still allowed to speak?
Yes, you are. Yeah,
This is a new motion,
yeah,
right?
it's a new motion. You can speak to the new motion. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is a tussle between, I guess, an ideological belief about what councils should and shouldn't do, and what they should involve themselves in. But look, I think in the spirit of coming to these debates with an open mind, and I genuinely have come with an open mind. I don't, you know, I'm not ideological really when it comes to this stuff. And I think that Alderman Ryan's responses there were actually quite sound in many ways. You know, I probably still feel like this is delving into political activism a little bit. Okay, it's using the council for activist purposes, but you know, I'm not sure that that's a hill I want to die on, really. You know, I have railed against activist causes, you know, people using local government for activist causes in the past. I'm not sure that Alderman Ryan's coming so much from a activist stance here as she is from just a place of kindness. And I also acknowledge what Alderman Hickey just said. She really reminded me of watching the Australian Open and that saga unfold, that we had largely forgotten that these guys were sitting in a hotel, I think for many years, if I remember correctly. Yes, I know all the federal arguments about, you know, we've got to stop the, but you know, that if we release people into the community, the boats will start up again and all that sort of stuff. I must admit, at this point, I'm not sure that these releasing a few gentlemen in the Park Hotel will really start a flood of boats coming in from Indonesia again. So look, yeah, I'm probably this point will support it.
Thank you, Alderman Fraser. Any further discussion? Alderman Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Alderman Fraser's concerns with this. In reading the report, Charles Woolley's comments in Saturday's Mercury came to mind about councils punching above their weight. Immigration is a federal issue and it's complex. However, watching the atrocities perpetrated in Ukraine at present and the horrors in other war-torn countries, you do get a feeling of uselessness. And my heart goes out to all those innocent people who are just seeking a safe and peaceful life. As the report sets out, signing the declaration doesn't commit to any formal obligations or statutory or financial responsibilities. I think what we're doing here is just raising awareness of the plight refugees around the world are in. And it's just a great pity we can't do more, but at least this is something. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Alderman Richardson. Any further discussion? No, I really appreciate the debate and the contributions that my fellow aldermen around the table have made to this conversation. I appreciate Alderman Ryan bringing it to the table to start with. Like Alderman Fraser, I came to the discussion with an open mind, but with some concerns around the item 2 in particular, because it is getting a bit political and talking about supporting, another council's motion is not something that we would typically consider. But hearing Alderman Ryan's response to Alderman Fraser's concerns and the comments made by Alderman Hickey as well, I can see the merit in supporting this part of the motion as well. So much to my surprise, I think I will also support it. But I do sort of echo those sentiments around, being mindful of the role and function of councils. And I think, the advocacy space is a really interesting one. And certainly we wouldn't want to be consuming all our time and resources with advocacy, but it's not something that we do often or do take lightly, because we are aware that of what our core sort of function is and where we must focus our resources. But this is a humanitarian issue and has come from a place of compassion. It won't require a significant amount of resources to make this statement. So I'm happy to support the recommendations. And again, thank you for the well-considered debate and respectful debate. If there's no further discussion, I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. No, thank you everybody for having the discussion, and I have nothing further to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan. Put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is carried unanimously. Okay. Are there any other motions without notice? No? Then that shall bring us to the end of our open council meeting at 7:20 p.m. Do I have someone to move that we go into closed council? Or Deputy Mayor, someone to second? Alderman Ryan. Put the recommendation to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is carried unanimously. Thank you to members of the public who have joined us online this evening. We look forward to welcoming members of the public back to Chambers for our April meeting, which will be on Tuesday, the 26th of April, the day after Anzac Day public holiday. So look out for the notification and the opportunity to register to come and attend that meeting in person. Of course, the live stream to Facebook and through our website will also continue. So you are welcome to join us online as well. Stay safe, be kind to each other, take care, and we will see you soon.